Somewhere not far from where you live, there's probably a wisteria growing over an old fence or porch, covered in massive cascades of purple flowers stretching almost the length of your arm. And the funny thing is, the person who planted it probably isn't doing anything special to make it happen. They forget to water it. They've never given it fertilizer. Yet every single spring, it comes back stronger, larger, and more beautiful than the year before. Then there's you. You bought a wisteria, planted it exactly where the garden center recommended, watered it regularly, and waited patiently. But 3 years later, all you have is a handful of green leaves and absolutely no flowers. Before we continue, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what season it is in your area. I read every comment, and it's amazing to see gardeners from completely different climates facing the exact same frustrating problem with this stubborn plant. Here's the secret most nurseries don't tell you. Keeping wisteria alive is actually easy. This plant is incredibly tough and can survive in many conditions. The real challenge isn't survival, it's getting those breathtaking blooms to appear. And the reason your wisteria refuses to flower usually comes down to 5 very specific mistakes. The surprising part. Many of them are the complete opposite of what most gardeners naturally think they should do. Make sure you stay until secret number 3, because that one mistake is responsible for more flowerless wisterias than almost anything else, yet hardly anyone talks about it honestly. Number 1. Stop using nitrogen fertilizer. It could be the reason your wisteria won't bloom. This is one of the biggest mistakes gardeners make with wisteria, and the frustrating part is that it usually comes from wanting to help the plant. You plant your wisteria, you want it to grow strong, so you start feeding it. Maybe you use a general-purpose fertilizer, add compost, or even give it the same fertilizer you use for your vegetables. But here's the problem. Wisteria doesn't need extra nitrogen the way most plants do. Wisteria belongs to the legume family, just like beans and clover. These plants have a special relationship with bacteria on their roots that allows them to capture nitrogen from the air and create their own supply. In other words, your wisteria is already making the nutrient it needs. When you add even more nitrogen, you're sending the plant the wrong message. Instead of producing flowers, it focuses all its energy on growing more leaves, longer stems, and thick green vines. That's why so many gardeners end up with a huge, healthy-looking wisteria that produces absolutely no blooms. The problem isn't that the plant is weak, it's that it's too focused on growing. Flower production requires a different balance, especially phosphorus and potassium, along with a little natural stress that encourages the plant to reproduce. So what should you do instead? Once your wisteria is established, usually after the first year in the ground, stop giving it nitrogen fertilizer completely. If you decide to feed it, choose a bloom-focused fertilizer with higher phosphorus levels, such as a rose or tomato fertilizer, and apply it only once in early spring. And remember, if your soil is already healthy and fertile, your wisteria may not need fertilizer at all. A slightly neglected wisteria often rewards you with more flowers. A heavily fertilized wisteria often rewards you with nothing but endless green growth. Number 2. Plant wisteria where it has to work a little. Less fertile soil can create more flowers. This secret connects directly to the first one, and it goes against what most gardeners naturally believe. We're always told that the best plants need the richest soil, the most compost, and the most nutrients possible. But wisteria doesn't follow that rule. When you plant wisteria in extremely rich, heavily improved soil, it often becomes too comfortable. The result? Fast-growing vines, enormous green leaves, and endless new shoots, but very few, if any, flowers. Why? Because the plant has everything it needs to grow. There's no reason for it to slow down and reproduce. Just like with excess nitrogen, too much available nutrition pushes wisteria into growth mode instead of bloom mode. What wisteria really wants is simple: plenty of sunlight and a little bit of challenge. Choose a location that gets at least 6 hours of direct sun every day. This part is essential. Then look for soil that is average, slightly dry, or even a little poor. That neglected corner of your garden where other plants struggle might actually be the perfect place for wisteria. When planting, resist the urge to improve everything. Don't fill the hole with loads of compost. Don't heavily amend the soil. Let the plant adapt to the conditions it's given. And if your wisteria has already been growing for years in rich, fertile soil and still refuses to flower, don't rush to dig it up or disturb the roots. You can't easily undo years of overfeeding. Instead, stop adding extra nutrients, allow the soil to naturally become less rich over time, and give the plant a season or two to adjust. With Wisteria, sometimes doing less is exactly what finally triggers those incredible blooms. Number 3. The root pruning method that can force a stubborn Wisteria to bloom. This is the secret I told you to wait for, and it's the one that can solve the most frustrating Wisteria problem of all. A plant that looks perfectly healthy, grows aggressively every year, but refuses to produce even a single flower. You've given it time. You've changed the fertilizer. You've adjusted the soil. Yet year after year, all you get is a massive green vine with no purple blooms. When that happens, your Wisteria may not need more care. It may need a little controlled stress. This technique is called root pruning, and while it sounds harsh, it has been used by experienced Wisteria growers for generations with impressive results. The best time to do this is in late autumn or very early spring. Take a sharp spade and push it straight down into the soil in a circle about 2 to 3 feet away from the main trunk. The goal is to cut through the outer roots all the way around the plant. You are not digging it up. You are not damaging the entire root system. You're simply making one clean cut through the outer roots. So why does this work? Because Wisteria responds to stress. When the plant senses that its root system has been slightly restricted, it can shift its energy away from endless leaf and vine production and toward reproduction, meaning flower buds. Many gardeners who struggled with a non-flowering Wisteria for years have seen blooms appear the following spring after trying root pruning for the first time. If the plant stops flowering again in the future, you can repeat the process every 2 or 3 years. But in many cases, one treatment is enough to break the cycle. The key with Wisteria is learning not to overcare for it. Once it begins flowering, don't immediately start feeding and pampering it again. A slightly stressed Wisteria is often the one that rewards you with the most spectacular blooms. Number 4. Summer pruning is the real secret to more flowers, not just winter pruning. Most gardeners only think about pruning their Wisteria once a year, usually in late winter when the plant is dormant and the structure of the vine is easier to see. That winter pruning is important, but here's what many people don't realize. It's not the pruning that decides how many flowers you'll get next spring. The pruning that has the biggest impact on flowering actually happens during summer, and it's the step most gardeners completely miss. About 2 months after your Wisteria finishes blooming, usually around mid to late summer depending on your climate, the plant starts producing long, fast-growing shoots. These thin, flexible vines stretch out in every direction searching for something to climb. The problem? These shoots are mostly focused on growth, not flowers. If you leave them untouched, the plant wastes a huge amount of energy creating more and more green growth instead of preparing flower buds for the following year. This is where summer pruning makes the difference. Take those long, wild shoots and cut them back to around 5 or 6 leaves from the main framework of the plant. You're not cutting away the important structure or removing major branches. You're simply shortening the excessive new growth. This redirects the plant's energy. Instead of constantly pushing out new vines, Wisteria begins storing energy and developing flower buds along the shortened stems, ready for the next blooming season. Think of pruning as a 2-part strategy. Winter pruning keeps the plant shaped, controlled, and healthy. Summer pruning encourages more flowers. If you skip the summer prune, you can do everything else correctly. The right fertilizer, the right soil, the right location, and still end up with a beautiful Wisteria that produces far more leaves than flowers. Number 5. Patience matters. How to know if your Wisteria is too young to flower. This is the one secret that many gardeners struggle to accept, because it isn't a technique or a quick fix. It's simply how Wisteria grows. Before you try changing the fertilizer, pruning, or soil conditions, you first need to understand the age and type of plant you're dealing with. If your Wisteria was grown from seed, it can take anywhere from 15 to 20 years before it produces its first flowers. No amount of extra feeding, pruning, or special care can completely speed up that natural maturity process. However, most Wisterias sold at garden centers are not grown from seed. They are usually grafted plants or grown from cuttings, which means they mature much faster. These plants can often begin flowering within 2 to 5 years when planted in the right conditions. So how can you tell which type you have? Look closely at the base of your Wisteria, right where the stem meets the soil. If you notice a swollen, slightly raised, or knobby area where one plant section was joined to another, that's a graft union. A grafted wisteria should normally bloom within a few years if its growing conditions are correct. But if the stem comes straight from the ground with no visible joint or swelling, there's a good chance it was grown from seed. In that case, you may simply need to wait much longer. Understanding this one detail can save gardeners years of frustration. Many people give up on a healthy wisteria because they think they've done something wrong, when the plant simply hasn't reached flowering age yet. But if you know your wisteria is grafted, it's been growing for 5 years or more, and it still refuses to bloom despite proper care, that's when the root pruning method from secret number 3 becomes the next step to try. So when you put all 5 secrets together, the answer becomes much clearer. First, stop giving your wisteria unnecessary nitrogen. A slightly hungry wisteria is often the one that rewards you with the most flowers. Second, don't spoil it with overly rich soil. Wisteria doesn't need perfect conditions. A little struggle can actually encourage it to bloom. Third, if your plant has been growing for years, looks healthy, and still refuses to flower, try root pruning. That one intentional stress can be the reset it needs to finally switch from endless growth to flower production. Fourth, remember that pruning once a year isn't enough. Winter pruning controls the shape, but summer pruning is what helps create next year's flower buds. And finally, find out whether your wisteria is grafted or grown from seed. That one detail can determine whether you're just a season away from blooms or still many years from seeing your first flowers. Follow these 5 steps, and the wisteria that has frustrated you for years could become the stunning vine everyone stops to admire, covered in hanging purple flowers and transforming your porch or garden into something unforgettable. If this changed the way you think about growing wisteria, consider subscribing. This channel is all about plants that gardeners call impossible, when the truth is, they're usually just misunderstood. I share new gardening videos every 2 days. And tell me in the comments, how many years has your wisteria gone without flowering? Have you ever tried root pruning? I read every comment, and your experiences help shape the future videos I create. Now go plant something, and then give it the space and time to surprise you.